Today I'm making sourdough stuffed naan bread. It's super soft, it's cheesy on the inside, it's really easy to make, and you can use either sourdough discard or active sourdough starter. We will start by adding 125 grams of the starter, 120 grams of milk, 60 grams of sour cream or Greek yogurt. I am using this Daisy sour cream. This is my favorite. And then you add 2 tablespoons of unsalted melted butter. And I like to mix these ingredients together first before adding any of the dry ingredients. So I go ahead and mix it very well until everything is well incorporated. Now I add half a teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of salt, and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And then I like to mix these together with the wet ingredients. And you can see how the wet ingredients kind of transform a little bit. It gets a little bit fluffy. And I don't know, it kind of changes a little bit. It looks a little bit thicker. It's pretty cool to see. And I like to mix those before adding the flour. I just like to see the wet ingredients transform a little bit. I add 240 grams of flour. And then I go ahead and mix everything together very well until everything is well incorporated. I do want to mention, if you use active sourdough starter, your dough will be less sticky than if you use discard, because the discard is a little bit runnier, so your dough will be a little bit wet like mine is right here. When I use active sourdough starter, my dough kind of comes together a bit better. It's smoother, it's not as sticky. So you can either add a little bit of flour or just leave it as is, like I am. So here I'm mixing with my hands, just incorporating everything together. And then I try to do some slap and folds, and eventually the dough isn't as sticky. So you go ahead and do the slap and folds, make sure that everything is well incorporated and mixed together. Now I'm using a rubber bench scraper just to clean off the dough from the sides of the bowl. I do wet the bench scraper, that way it's easier for it to pull on the dough, especially if your dough is a little bit sticky. So like I said, you can add a little bit of flour here, that way, it smooths out a little bit more. If you want to let your dough ferment on the counter for a few hours, you can definitely do that. Here I am just going to wait 30 minutes so the dough can rest, and then I will be ready to shape it into the little dough balls. So this is what the dough looks like after I'm done mixing everything and cleaning my bowl. Now that I'm ready to use my dough, I am going to just weigh it out to make sure I have 8 equal pieces. That way they kind of look the same and not one way bigger than the other. And I go ahead and do some slap and folds. You can see here that the dough isn't as sticky anymore, but I like to smoothen it out. That way when I put it on the scale, it looks better and it's nicer. So now I weigh it out into the 8 equal pieces. I use a metal bench scraper to cut the dough. It's easier this way. And I like to use my mat to shape the dough. I don't have like a cute little counter space, so I definitely need the mat. And it is on my table, so if you don't have a good counter space to do any of this, just use your dining table. This is what I do. So I think my dough balls were about 73 grams each. You can put a little bit of flour on your scale, that way the dough doesn't stick to it if it's a little bit on the sticky side. So now I go ahead and grab the dough balls, and one by one I go ahead and pinch the dough balls towards the center, kind of like how a bow looks like. And then I just put it on the mat and I do circular C motions to make the dough ball tight and have tension. And then I do the same thing for every single one. Here I'm showing you once again, just pinching it, pinching all of the dough towards the middle or the center, and then I just put it on the mat and do circular motions. You want to let the dough rest maybe for like 10 minutes. And if your dough is way too sticky, like you see this one was kind of sticking to my fingers, you could just grab a little bit of flour and just put it around the dough, and then you can continue doing what you're doing. flouring my surface and my rolling pin, making sure that there are no dry bits, that way the dough doesn't stick to it. And at this time I do have a pan on low heat warming up, and this is how I like to stuff the naan bread. I like to grab the dough balls and just flatten it out on my mat. I put the cheese or anything that you want to put inside, and then I go ahead and pinch it towards the center again. And then I pinch it very gently and I kind of flatten it out with my hand. And then I use the rolling pin to kind of flatten it and try to get a circular shape as best as I can. I am not the best at this. If you guys have seen previous videos, I'm not the best at shaping these, but they still come out really good and they don't look as bad anymore. So I just grab the dough, put the rolling pin over it, and then kind of rotate the dough 45 degrees until I get all around trying to get that perfect shape. I also like to use my hands to kind of flatten out the edges or kind of make them smooth looking or a little bit round. You can see the bottom right here looks a little bit shaggy, but I try to use my hands to make it look more round and even. As I'm shaping one, I already have one on the pan, and then I kind of rotate. So once I'm done shaping this one, I flip or turn halfway and then, just continue. That way I can be efficient. And you can see here that the naan bread is kind of fluffing up in some parts, and that's a great sign that it is being cooked all the way through. Here I'm showing you how to flip the naan bread and it does not stick to the pan. You do not need to oil, butter, or put anything on the pan. As long as the pan was hot enough from the start, it should not stick to it. You can see here the little bubbles on the side. It is cooking nicely. Mine usually take about 1.5 to 2 minutes to fully be cooked from each side. Sorry, this angle is not the best. I just couldn't film and flip it at the same time, but this is the end result. This naan bread is super soft, super fluffy. When you reheat it, it's still super soft and fluffy. Look at that cheese pool. You can add more if you'd like, but I thought this amount of cheese was perfect. It was pretty hot, so that's why I'm kind of trying to do it fast here. But I hope you guys try this recipe out. You can even sprinkle some garlic butter with some parsley on top, and it's so delicious. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Leave me any comments down below, and I'll see you guys in my next one.